Picture the morning of September 4th, 476 AD. You are standing in Ravenna, in the shadow of a palace that still smells of incense and imperial marble. The last Roman emperor, a boy, 16 years old, named Romulus Augustulus, is about to be deposed by a Germanic warlord named Odoacer. In our timeline, Odoacer sends the boy into exile, dissolves the Western throne, and the greatest empire the world has ever seen quietly exhales its last breath. But, in this timeline, the blade never falls. A loyalist legion, bribed, redirected, arrives in time. Odoacer is killed, the boy emperor survives, and the empire, wounded, bloated, and rotting from the inside, staggers forward into a future it was never supposed to have. You think that sounds like a victory? You think that sounds like hope? You have never been more wrong in your life, because the Rome that survives is not the Rome of marble and law and civilization. It is something older, something darker, something that does not care whether you were ever born at all. Welcome to What If History X. History is a thin veil, one ripple, and it all tears apart. For a moment, just a moment, it looks like the right outcome. The empire stabilizes. The Germanic tribes are pushed back to the Rhine and the Danube. Constantinople and Ravenna forge a fragile unity. Roman roads are maintained. Roman law is codified further. Roman legions, reformed and rearmed, hold the borders that our timeline lost forever in the 5th century. Poets write about the eternal city. Senators speak of a second golden age. Children grow up learning Latin as a living language, not a dead one. The aqueducts flow, the forums fill with argument and commerce, and the particular kind of noise that only exists when people believe they are safe. It sounds like civilization. It sounds like everything we've spent 2,000 years trying to rebuild. But the timeline is bleeding. Because Rome did not survive because it became better, it survived because it became harder, crueler, more efficient at the one thing empires are ultimately for: control. And a Rome that never fell is a Rome that never had to question itself, never had to reform, never had to reckon with the idea that power, left unchecked for long enough, does not govern people. It consumes them. And this is where the world you know begins to vanish. By 500 AD, the empire has restabilized under a new dynasty, harder men than the boy Romulus. Men who understand that the only way to keep the machine running is to feed it. And empires, when they cannot expand outward, turn inward. Taxation doubles, then triples. The free farmers who once formed the backbone of Roman society, the men who grew the food, raised the armies, built the roads, are legally reclassified as bound laborers. Not slaves, technically, but the word for what they are doesn't matter. When they cannot leave their land, cannot sell their labor, cannot feed their children without surrendering 30% of what they grow to a prefect, they will never meet. This is not speculation. This process, called the colonate, was already beginning in the real Roman Empire of the 4th century. In our timeline, the collapse interrupted it. In this one, nothing interrupts it. It simply completes itself. You wake up in the year 550 AD, and you are, technically, a free citizen of the greatest empire in human history. You have never voted, you have never chosen your governor, you have never held a document that guaranteed your rights. Because rights, in the language of this Rome, are not inherent, they are granted by the emperor. And what is granted can be revoked before breakfast. But it gets so much worse. 541 AD. The plague of Justinian still comes. Rome is not ready. In our timeline, the plague of Justinian arrived in 541 AD and killed between 25 and 50 million people, roughly half the population of Europe and the Mediterranean. In our timeline, it struck a fragmented world of small kingdoms and competing powers. Terrible, yes. Survivable, perhaps, because the fragmentation meant no single political system collapsed entirely. In this timeline, it strikes the empire at its height. A single interconnected network of roads, ports, trade routes, and military supply lines, the most efficient disease vector in human history. The same infrastructure that made Rome great becomes the mechanism of its biological catastrophe. A sick soldier in Alexandria is in Carthage within a week. He is in Rome within 2. He is in the legionary camps on the Rhine within a month. There is no fragmentation to slow it. There is only the empire. And then there is the dying. You are burning your neighbor's body in the street because the burial guild stopped functioning 3 weeks ago. You are boiling leather to make soup. You are watching the aqueduct run dry, not because it broke, but because there is no one left who knows how to maintain the valve system, and that knowledge, it turns out, lived in the heads of 7 men. And all 7 of them died in the same fortnight. But that's not even the most terrifying part. The empire's response is authoritarian silence. No emperor will publicly acknowledge the scale of what is happening, because acknowledging it is an admission that the eternal city is not eternal. Imperial propaganda continues. Coins are still minted with the face of a man who has been dead for a month. Marching into plague zones means execution for desertion, and so it grinds. Through bone, through memory, through you, the map changes. So do you. So does everyone who was supposed to exist. Here is what Rome's survival costs the rest of the world. The Arab world, in our timeline, produces the Islamic Golden Age between the 8th and 13th centuries, a period of staggering scientific and philosophical achievement. Algebra, optics, the preservation and translation of Greek philosophy that would eventually seed the European Renaissance. Arabia languished, Rome and Persia's shadows loomed, Islam's dawn, unfelt. That flowering of human intellect, cancelled. Not conquered, just never born. The printing press in our timeline was invented in 1440 by Johannes Gutenberg in a fragmented, intellectually competitive Europe where no single power could suppress the flow of ideas. In this timeline, Rome controls the Mediterranean, controls the trade routes, controls the flow of papyrus and parchment and knowledge. An empire that survives on control has no interest in a technology that makes information cheap. The printing press is not invented. It is not suppressed, it simply never occurs to anyone to build it, because the conditions that would have made Gutenberg necessary do not exist. And this is where it becomes personal. Every event that led to your existence, every war, every migration, every famine, every plague that drove your ancestors from one place to another, those events are not in this timeline's ledger. The great migrations of the 5th century that spread Germanic peoples across Europe, mixing bloodlines, creating new cultures, new languages, new nations, none of that happens. The Viking Age, born from Scandinavian population pressure and the absence of Roman dominance, never happens. The Norman conquest of England never happens. The chain of events that placed 2 specific people in the same room, in the same city, in the same century, so that they could eventually produce the lineage that produced you, that chain is broken at link number 1. You were never born in this timeline. You are a ghost haunting a world that forgot to make you. And the world didn't notice. That is the worst part. The world didn't notice at all. By the year 1000 AD, the Roman Empire has not progressed in the way our civilization did. It has persisted. There is a difference. Persistence without innovation is a kind of decay that takes centuries to recognize, because from inside it, every day looks almost exactly like the one before. The technology of the year 1000 inches this timeline resembles the technology of 400 AD. Not because Roman engineers were unintelligent, they were extraordinary, but because innovation requires incentive, and in an empire that controls all markets, suppresses all competition, and treats intellectual challenge as political threat, the incentive calculus points only toward loyalty, toward silence, toward the performance of stability. There is no renaissance in this world. There is no enlightenment. There is no industrial revolution, no steam engine, no electricity, no germ theory, no antibiotics. There is just the empire, and its roads, and its legions, and its liturgy of control, extending outward in every direction, mistaking endurance for greatness and domination for peace. In our world, the fall of Rome was a catastrophe that lasted centuries, but it was also a reset, a terrible, violent, necessary clearing that allowed 1,000 different experiments in civilization to run simultaneously. Democracy re-emerged, science re-emerged, art re-emerged, Human rights, the radical, fragile, still unfinished idea that a person has worth independent of their usefulness to power, re-emerged. None of that happens here. Because Rome never cleared. It never reset. It simply continued, like a glacier, vast, cold, slow, and crushing everything beneath it into a flatness that looks, from a distance, almost like order. But here's the problem. Order and freedom have never, in the entire history of the human species, occupied the same space for very long. What this timeline means, what it costs. The most terrifying thing about this scenario is not the plague, or the authoritarianism, or the erased bloodlines. It is how reasonable Rome's survival seems at first. We are taught, from childhood, that the fall of Rome was a tragedy. And it was. Millions died. Centuries of hard-won knowledge were lost. The Dark Ages that followed were genuinely dark. But the fall was also a door. And what walked through that door slowly, painfully, over 1,000 years, was the flawed, incomplete, still unfinished project of human freedom. The idea that you are not the property of the state, that your mind is yours, that the future is not already decided by the men who hold the longest swords. Rome's survival, in this nightmare version, is not a door, it is a wall, and humanity spends the next 1,000 years pressing its face against it, not remembering what it was looking for, not even knowing that something on the other side was ever supposed to exist. Our world is a miracle built on a graveyard of better timelines. The civilization you live in, with all its failures, all its injustices, all its terrifying fragility, exists because Rome fell at exactly the right moment, in exactly the right way, to allow something else to breathe. One legion, one bribed commander, one boy emperor who survived when he shouldn't have. That is all it would have taken. And none of us would be here to know what we had lost. So here's the question I want to leave you with. If you woke up in this timeline, in this eternal empire that never learned to question itself, would you even know something was missing? Would you feel the shape of the world that was supposed to be? Or would you just live, work, obey, endure, never knowing that somewhere in the wreckage of a different 476 AD, a version of the future was waiting to be built and it had your name on it? If this were your reality, how would you survive? What would you do if the world you were supposed to inherit was deleted before you were ever born? Tell me in the comments. I want to know. Thanks for watching What If History X. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you in the next timeline.